The rain tapped gently against the windows of my Brooklyn apartment, a comfortable 3-bedroom I'd purchased 30 years ago when the neighborhood was still considered up and coming. Back then, people thought I was crazy to invest so much in this area. Now, with property values through the roof, those same people call me lucky. Luck had nothing to do with it, just hard work and sacrifice. I sat at my kitchen table, nursing a cup of black coffee while scrolling through family photos on my iPad. My weathered hands, with calluses that never quite faded despite 5 years of retirement, swiped through images of happier times. Rebecca as a toddler with chocolate ice cream smeared across her face. Rebecca at her high school graduation, her smile brighter than the June sun. Rebecca in her wedding dress, looking so much like her mother, it made my chest ache. Alice had been gone for 12 years now. Breast cancer, the most vicious thief I'd ever encountered. It stole not just my wife, but Rebecca's mother when our daughter was only 22. I often wondered how different things might have been if Alice had lived to see Rebecca marry Jason, to witness this pregnancy, our first grandchild. My phone buzzed against the wooden table, Rebecca's face lighting up the screen. I felt that familiar warmth spread through my chest at the sight of her. No matter how old she got, she'd always be my little girl. "Hey, sweetheart," I answered, trying to keep my voice light, despite the heaviness that had settled in my chest since waking up alone as I did every morning. "Dad." Her voice had that forced cheerfulness I'd come to recognize when she was nervous about something. "How are you doing today?" "Can't complain," I said, the old standard response. "Just looking at some old photos. Found that one of you at Coney Island when you were about 6. You remember, the one where you—" "Dad," she interrupted, "I need to talk to you about something." I set my coffee down, that familiar dread settling in my stomach. I'd heard that tone before, the prelude to difficult conversations. "What's going on, Becca?" She cleared her throat. "So, you know we've been planning the baby shower, right?" "Of course," I said. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks. I'd even hired a professional cleaning service to come through my apartment. Not that it needed much work. Unlike some men my age, I kept a tidy home. Alice had taught me well. "Well, we've decided to have it at your place. The view from your terrace is just perfect, and your living room has so much more space than our apartment." I brightened immediately. "That's wonderful. I'd be happy to host. When were you thinking? I can make sure I've got everything ready." The pause that followed stretched just a beat too long. "The thing is, Dad," another pause, "Jason thinks, well, we both think it might be better if you weren't actually there during the shower itself." The words didn't register at first, like they were spoken in a language I almost understood, but couldn't quite translate. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. "It's just that, well, you know how these things usually are. It's typically just the mother-to-be and her friends. All women. Jason's mom will help host. And she's bringing some of her friends to help out too." "I see." I didn't see at all. My apartment, but I wasn't welcome. "And this was your idea?" Another pause. "Jason thought it would be more comfortable for everyone. You know how you can be sometimes, Dad, a bit old-fashioned." "Old-fashioned." The new code word for outdated, irrelevant in the way. "I understand," I said, though I didn't. "When is it?" "Next Saturday from 2 to 6. Would that be okay? We'd come by around noon to set up, and we'd clean everything up afterward, I promise." I glanced around my apartment, at the life I'd built with decades of 60-hour work weeks as a construction project manager. The home where I'd raised my daughter after her mother died. The place where I'd grieved alone, keeping my pain hidden so Rebecca wouldn't worry about me while she was away at college. "That's fine," I said, my voice steady, despite the hollow feeling expanding in my chest. "I'll make sure to be out of the way. Thanks. Dad, you're the best." The relief in her voice was palpable. "I'll text you the details later, okay? Love you." She hung up before I could respond, before I could say I loved her too, before I could ask why my own grandson's baby shower was a place where I wasn't welcome. I set the phone down carefully on the table and took a sip of my now lukewarm coffee. The bitter taste matched my mood perfectly. I'd given everything for Rebecca. After Alice died, I'd turned down promotions that would have required travel. I'd scheduled my work around Rebecca's college breaks so I could drive the 4 hours to Boston to visit her at school. I'd helped with her tuition, covered the down payment on her first car, contributed significantly to her wedding. Not because I expected anything in return. You don't have children as an investment strategy. You have them because you want to give love unconditionally. But being shut out like this, and it stung in ways I couldn't articulate. I pushed back from the table and walked to the large window overlooking the neighborhood. The rain had intensified, sheets of water distorting the view of the street below. Somewhere down there, life was going on as normal. People were rushing to work, picking up coffee, living their lives. And here I was, a 67-year-old man, being told I wasn't welcome at a celebration in my own home. My phone buzzed again with a text message. Rebecca, BTW, can you make sure the spare bedroom is cleared out? Jason's mom wants to use it as a gift room. I stared at the message, not responding immediately. The spare bedroom had been Rebecca's room growing up. I'd kept it largely intact over the years, though I'd added a desk where I sometimes paid bills or worked on my laptop. It was the room where I stored our family photo albums, Alice's jewelry box, the quilts her grandmother had made. Another buzz. Rebecca, and do you mind if we move some furniture around in the living room? We need to make space for the games and gift opening. I typed back a simple, no problem, whatever you need. I set the phone down and walked to the spare bedroom, Rebecca's old room. Standing in the doorway, I surveyed the space. The walls were still the pale blue she'd chosen when she was 15. The bookshelves still held some of her old novels, the ones she hadn't taken to her own place. On the dresser sat framed photos, Rebecca and me at her college graduation, Alice holding newborn Rebecca in the hospital, the three of us at Disney World when Rebecca was 10. It was in this room that I'd held my daughter, while she cried over her first heartbreak. Where I'd sat on the edge of her bed, night after night in the months following her mother's death, making sure she was sleeping okay, where I'd helped her pack for college, fighting back tears as I folded her clothes and placed them in suitcases. And now it was to be a gift room, and I was expected to clear it out, then make myself scarce. I opened the closet door, revealing boxes of holiday decorations and winter clothes. In the back corner sat a stack of storage containers labeled in Alice's neat handwriting, Rebecca, school projects, Rebecca, baby clothes, family photos 2000-2005. I pulled out one of the boxes and opened it. Inside were carefully preserved art projects, science reports, and creative writing assignments from Rebecca's elementary school years. I lifted out a papier-mâché solar system, the planets now slightly crushed, but still recognizable. Rebecca had been so proud of this project. She'd insisted on doing it mostly herself, though I'd helped her hang the planets from their wire supports. "Look, Daddy," she'd said, spinning Jupiter on its axis. "I made the great red spot extra big so you can see it." I carefully placed the solar system back in the box and closed the lid. These weren't just objects, they were physical manifestations of memories, of a life shared, of love given freely. And now I was being asked to put them away, to hide them from view, to make room for new memories in which I apparently had no place. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. My retirement account showed a healthy balance, not extravagant but comfortable, thanks to decades of careful saving and the union pension from my construction days. Rebecca and Jason were both listed as beneficiaries, along with provisions for their children, even this unborn grandson, who I might be kept at arm's length from. A notification popped up on my phone, a reminder about my upcoming property tax payment. The apartment that had seemed like such a risky investment 3 decades ago was now worth nearly 7 times what I'd paid for it. Another asset that would eventually pass to Rebecca, another piece of my life's work that would benefit her long after I was gone. Did she know that? Did she understand the sacrifices that had gone into providing this life for her? The double shifts I'd worked when she needed braces, the vacations I'd skipped to afford her summer camps, the retirement I'd delayed to help with her student loans, and now the apartment that I'd bought and maintained all these years was good enough for her baby shower, but I wasn't welcome to attend. I closed the banking app and sat heavily on Rebecca's old bed. The mattress creaked under my weight, a familiar sound from years of sitting here, reading bedtime stories, having difficult conversations, sharing quiet moments. My phone buzzed again. "Rebecca, also, is it okay if we use your nice plates and silverware? Jason's mom is worried about using plastic with her friends from the country club." I stared at the message. The nice plates had been Alice's. Wedding gifts from her parents. We'd only use them for special occasions, Thanksgiving, Christmas, milestone birthdays. After Alice died, I couldn't bear to use them for a long time. They remained in the china cabinet, gathering dust until Rebecca's college graduation dinner, when it felt right to honor the occasion with Alice's plates. Jason's mother wanted to use them for her country club friends. For a celebration I wasn't allowed to attend. I texted back, "Of course. They're in the china cabinet, top shelf." I set the phone down and returned to the living room, looking at it through the eyes of a stranger. Would they rearrange the furniture permanently? Or put it back when they were done? Would they notice the slight discoloration on the wall where Alice and I had hung our wedding portrait, now relocated to my bedroom after her death because it had been too painful to see every day? Would they use the sofa where I'd sat with Rebecca night after night during her middle school years, helping her with math homework she insisted was impossible, until the moment it clicked and her eyes lit up with understanding? I walked to the kitchen and pulled out a tumbler, pouring 2 fingers of whiskey. It wasn't even noon, but today called for something stronger than coffee. I'd earned this small indulgence after a lifetime of restraint and responsibility. The amber liquid burned pleasantly down my throat. I rarely drank these days, occasionally with my Thursday night poker group, 4 other retirees who'd worked construction with me over the years, sometimes when the loneliness became too acute, usually on anniversaries or holidays. I took another sip and pulled out my phone again, opening the text conversation with Rebecca. I started typing, deleted it, started again. What could I say? That I was hurt? That I felt used? That this seemed profoundly unfair? No, that wasn't how I'd raised her. I'd taught her that life often isn't fair, and complaining rarely helps. I'd shown her by example that you put your head down, do the work, and take care of the people you love without expecting accolades or even appreciation. I deleted the draft message and put the phone away. Instead, I walked to my desk and pulled out a yellow legal pad, the kind I'd used throughout my career to track project details and make to-do lists. With methodical precision, I began writing down everything I would need to do before the baby shower. Clear out Rebecca's old room, deep clean the apartment again, make sure all the china and silverware are spotless, buy fresh flowers for the table, stock the fridge with sparkling water and juice, make myself scarce. The last item sat there, stark against the yellow paper. Make myself scarce. From my own home, for my own grandson's celebration. I tapped the pen against the paper, thinking. Then I added another item. Call Stanley about the will. Stanley was my attorney, a man I'd met 30 years ago when he was just starting his practice, and I was buying this apartment. He'd handled Alice's estate after her death, and had drawn up my will shortly thereafter. It might be time for some amendments. Not out of spite. I wasn't a vengeful man, but recent events had made me reconsider what was fair, what was just. I folded the list and put it in my pocket, then finished my whiskey in one burning swallow. Outside, the rain had stopped, and watery sunlight was breaking through the clouds. I decided to take a walk to clear my head. Maybe I'd stop by the hardware store and pick up some boxes for packing up Rebecca's old room. Maybe I'd call Stanley from the park, where I could speak freely without the walls of this apartment, this home filled with memories, pressing in on me. As I shrugged on my jacket and reached for my keys, my phone buzzed one more time. Jason. Thanks for letting us use your place, Frank. Really appreciate it. Quick question. Is your Wi-Fi password still Rebecca1993? I stared at the message for a long moment. Jason had never called me anything but Mr. Donovan to my face, and Rebecca1993, my daughter's name and birth year, had been my password for years, through all my devices. It was easy to remember, a constant reminder of what mattered most to me. But now, it felt like just another thing being taken for granted. I texted back, "You're welcome. You're Jason," and yes, same password. Then I put the phone in my pocket, locked my apartment door behind me, and headed out into the day, determined to make some changes. Not drastic ones, not cruel ones, just adjustments that reflected the new reality I found myself facing, one where my lifetime of sacrifice was valued primarily for the assets it had produced, not for the love that had motivated it. As I walked down the street, I felt lighter somehow, as if making the decision to protect myself had lifted a burden I hadn't known I was carrying. I'd always put Rebecca first, her needs, her wants, her happiness. Maybe it was time to consider my own. The neighborhood had changed dramatically over the decades. What had once been working-class apartments and small family businesses had transformed into upscale boutiques, artisanal coffee shops, and luxury condos. I still knew most of the old-timers, though, the ones who, like me, had been here long enough to remember when this was a different place. I nodded to Mrs. Abramovitz, who'd been running the corner newsstand since before I moved in. She waved back, her arthritis-twisted fingers still somehow nimble enough to make change and fold newspapers. "Frank, how are you, dear?" she called out. "No paper today?" I changed course and headed to her stand. "I'm good. Esther, and yes, I'll take a Times, please." She handed me the paper, her shrewd eyes studying my face. "You don't look good. Something's wrong." I tried to smile. "Nothing important, just getting old." She snorted. "Tell me about it." "But that's not it." "I know that look. That's the look of someone who's been disappointed by family." I raised an eyebrow. "How could you possibly know that?" She tapped her temple. 62 years running this stand, I've seen every human expression there is. Plus, she added with a wry smile, I raised 3 children who've all disappointed me in various ways. It's what children do. I laughed despite myself. "Rebecca's having a baby shower at my apartment. I'm not invited." Esther's expression darkened. "At your own home? That's not right." I shrugged, uncomfortable with the sympathy. "It's fine. These things are usually for women anyway." "Nonsense," she said sharply. "My Morris was at all our daughters' baby showers. Made the punch, took the photos, the whole thing. It's your grandchild and your home." I tucked the newspaper under my arm. "Well, that's how it is. I'm heading to get some boxes to clear out her old room." Esther reached across the counter and patted my hand. "Don't let them walk all over you." "Frank, you're too good a man." I thanked her and continued my walk, her words echoing in my mind. Was I letting them walk all over me? It had never occurred to me to refuse Rebecca's request. The thought of creating conflict with my only child was anathema to me. But at what point did accommodation become enablement of disrespect? I reached the hardware store and wandered the aisles, picking up packing boxes, packing tape, bubble wrap. The mundane tasks helped settle my thoughts. As I was checking out, I ran into Miguel, another superintendent from a building down the block. We'd often shared maintenance tips and complaints about difficult tenants over the years. "Frank, good to see you, man. How's retirement treating you?" he asked, clapping me on the shoulder. "Can't complain," I said automatically. "How about you? Still dealing with that leak in 5B? Miguel rolled his eyes. "Finally fixed it. Turns out the problem was coming from 6B all along. Guy had modified his shower without permission. If you can believe it." He nodded at my purchases. "You moving?" I shook my head. "No, just clearing out some old stuff. My daughter's having a baby shower at my place next weekend." "That's great news. Congratulations, Grandpa." His genuine enthusiasm made the ache in my chest intensify. "Thanks," I said. "I'm looking forward to it. You should be proud, man, full circle, you know. Nothing better than grandkids. My Elena, she's got me wrapped around her little finger already and she's only 3. I smiled at his obvious joy. "I'm sure this little guy will too." "A boy? Even better. You can teach him all that construction stuff. Take him to ball games. It's the best, Frank. Really the best." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Would I get to teach my grandson anything? Would Jason and his country club mother allow that? Or would I be kept at the periphery, good enough to provide financial support but not welcome to be a real presence in his life? "Listen," Miguel said, "a bunch of us are getting together at O'Malley's tonight to watch the game. You should come. First round's on me to celebrate the grandbaby." O'Malley's was the local bar, one of the few original establishments that had survived the neighborhood's gentrification. I hadn't been there in months. "I'll think about it," I said, which was my standard non-committal response. Miguel's expression turned serious. "You know, Frank, retirement's not good for a man if he just sits alone in his apartment. You need to get out, be with people." I raised an eyebrow. "I get out. I've got my poker group on Thursdays. Once a week is not enough human contact. Trust me on this. My uncle retired 5 years ago, hardly left the house, started talking to his plants. Now we can't get him to shut up when he does see people." He grinned to show he was joking, but his eyes remained concerned. "I'll be there," I found myself saying. "What time?" Miguel's face lit up. 7, and I'm holding you to it, old man. No bailing." I paid for my supplies and headed back to my apartment, thinking about Miguel's invitation. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had been isolating too much, letting my world shrink to the confines of my apartment and the occasional outing with my poker buddies. Back at home, I set the packing supplies on the kitchen table and pulled out my phone. It was time to call Stanley. His assistant put me through right away, one of the perks of being a long-term client. "Frank, good to hear from you. How's everything going?" Stanley's voice boomed through the phone with characteristic energy. In his mid-60s now, he showed no signs of slowing down. "I'm doing all right," I said, "but I'm thinking it might be time to review my will. Make some adjustments." "Of course," he said, his tone becoming more professional. "What kind of changes are you considering?" I hesitated. Saying it out loud would make it real. "I want to look at options for protecting my assets, making sure they're distributed in a way that reflects my wishes exactly." "Has something happened, Frank?" Stanley's voice held a note of concern. "The last time we spoke, everything was set up to pass to Rebecca, with provisions for any grandchildren." "Nothing drastic," I assured him. I'm reconsidering how much control I want to maintain even after I'm gone." "I see." Stanley was quiet for a moment. "How about you come into the office next week? We can go over everything in detail, look at your options. Would Thursday at 2 work?" I agreed to the appointment and hung up, feeling both relieved and anxious. I wasn't planning anything vindictive. I just wanted to ensure that my life's work was respected, that the sacrifices I'd made were acknowledged in some way. I spent the rest of the afternoon packing up Rebecca's old room, carefully wrapping each framed photo, each school project, each memory in bubble wrap, and placing them in boxes that I labeled meticulously: photos, Rebecca, ages 5 to 10, school awards, family vacations. As I worked, I found myself talking to Alice, as I often did when I was alone. Not out loud, I wasn't that far gone yet, but in my head, carrying on the conversation we might have had if she was still here. "What would you think of all this, Allie? Am I overreacting? Would you tell me to let it go, to focus on the joy of becoming a grandfather?" I could almost hear her practical, no-nonsense response. "It's not about the baby shower, Frank, and you know it. It's about respect, it's about being seen." Alice had always seen me, had recognized the man beneath the stoic exterior that years of construction work and traditional masculinity had built around me. She'd known when I needed to talk, when I needed space, when I needed reassurance that the long hours and missed family dinners were appreciated. Without her, I sometimes felt invisible. Not to my poker buddies or to people like Esther and Miguel, but to the one person who mattered most, my daughter. By evening, I'd packed up most of the room. The bed remained, stripped of its bedding, and the dresser stood empty, drawers slightly ajar. I'd moved the boxes to my bedroom closet, out of sight but close enough that I could access them if I wanted to revisit those memories. I checked my watch, 6:30. If I was going to meet Miguel at O'Malley's, I needed to get moving. I showered quickly and changed into fresh jeans and a flannel shirt, my standard casual wear. As I was about to leave, my phone buzzed with another text from Rebecca. "Rebecca, hey Dad, just checking, do you have any allergies to scented candles? Jason's mom wants to bring some for ambiance." I stared at the message. Not "how are you doing," or "thanks for clearing out the room," or even "I appreciate you letting us use your place." Just a question about candles for Jason's mother. I typed back, "No allergies? Heading out for the evening. Spare room is all cleared." I hesitated, then added, "Love you, Becca." Her response came quickly. "Thanks, Dad. You're the best. Love you too." 3 exclamation points, as if enthusiasm could paper over the underlying issue. I pocketed my phone and headed to O'Malley's, determined to push these thoughts aside for the evening. The bar was exactly as I remembered it. Dark wood, the same neon beer signs that had been there for decades, the familiar smell of hops and fried food. Miguel waved from a corner table where he sat with 4 other men, all vaguely familiar from the neighborhood. "Frank, you made it." Miguel's genuine pleasure at seeing me was a balm to my bruised ego. He made quick introductions: Dave and Tony, who ran the local plumbing business; Hector, the recently retired mailman who'd delivered to our neighborhood for 30 years; and Joe, who owned the bodega down the block. I nodded to each man, accepting the beer Miguel pushed toward me. "We were just talking about how the neighborhood's changed," Hector said. "Remember when the scariest thing on this block was Mrs. Petrelli's Rottweiler?" I chuckled. "That dog was a menace. Nearly took a chunk out of my leg once when I was carrying groceries up to my apartment." "Now the scariest thing is the rent," Joe said, his expression somber. "My landlord just raised it again. 30%. I don't know how much longer I can keep the store open." The conversation flowed easily from there. Complaints about gentrification, stories about the old days, updates on children and grandchildren. These men understood the world as I did. They'd worked with their hands, built lives through persistence and grit rather than fancy degrees or family connections. "Frank here is about to be a grandfather," Miguel announced during a lull in the conversation. His daughter's having a boy. A round of congratulations followed, with Hector insisting on buying a celebratory shot of whiskey for everyone. Best thing that ever happened to me was becoming a grandfather, Dave said, his weathered face splitting into a wide grin. All the fun of having kids with none of the real responsibility. Speak for yourself, Tony countered. My daughter works full-time. I watch my granddaughter 3 days a week. More work than when my own kids were little, I swear. You get to see her that often? I couldn't keep the wistfulness from my voice. Tony nodded. Every Monday, Wednesday and Friday. Exhausting but worth it. Frank's daughter is having the baby shower at his place, Miguel said. When is it again? Next Saturday, I replied, taking a sip of beer. We should stop by, Miguel suggested. Bring some cigars to celebrate. I set my beer down carefully. I won't be there, actually. They'd prefer to keep it to just the women and Jason's family. A moment of awkward silence followed. At your own home? Joe asked, his brow furrowed. I shrugged, uncomfortable with the sudden attention. It's fine. These things are usually for the women anyway. The men exchanged glances. That's not right, Hector said finally. My daughters insisted I be at their baby showers, said they wouldn't have them without me there. Different families have different traditions, I said diplomatically, not wanting to criticize Rebecca to these men. Sounds like some bullshit to me, Tony said bluntly. No offense, Frank, but your son-in-law sounds like a piece of work. I should have defended Jason. That's what a supportive father-in-law would do. Instead, I just took another sip of beer. Is he one of those fancy types? Joe asked. My daughter married a guy like that. Thinks he's better than everyone because he works in an office instead of a real job. I thought about Jason. With his MBA and his corporate job, his carefully casual designer clothes that cost more than I'd spent on an entire year's wardrobe, about his mother, with her country club membership, and her disdain for plastic plates. He's a good provider, I said finally. Takes care of Rebecca, that's what matters. But does he respect you? Hector pressed. That matters too. I didn't answer immediately. Did Jason respect me? He was unfailingly polite when we met, which wasn't often, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, usually around holidays or Rebecca's birthday. But there was always a distance, a sense that he was tolerating my presence rather than welcoming it. I think, I said slowly, that Jason sees me as not quite part of their world. I didn't go to college. I worked construction my whole life. I don't talk about stocks or European vacations or whatever it is they discuss with his parents. So what? Miguel said fiercely. You built things with your hands. Real things that last. Buildings people live and work in. What does he do? Push papers around, type on a computer all day. I appreciated Miguel's loyalty, but shook my head. The world's changing. What we did, it's not valued the same way anymore. That's their loss, Dave said firmly. And if your daughter can't see what you've given her, that's her loss too. I felt a rush of gratitude for these men, for their understanding and their straightforward assessment of the situation. There was no need to explain or justify my feelings here. They got it. The conversation moved on to safer topics. The baseball playoffs, local politics, complaints about aging bodies that didn't work the way they once had. I found myself relaxing, laughing more than I had in months. By the time I headed home, comfortably buzzed from 3 beers and the shot of whiskey, I felt better than I had all day. The problem with Rebecca and Jason hadn't disappeared, but it felt less overwhelming somehow. I had perspective now, and the beginnings of a plan. The walk home took me past the local 24-hour diner, its windows glowing warm against the night. On impulse, I stopped in and took a seat at the counter. Coffee black, I told the waitress, a middle-aged woman whose name tag read Donna. She poured the coffee and slid it across to me. Anything else, hon? I hesitated, then said, Actually, could I get a slice of apple pie heated up with a scoop of vanilla ice cream? Coming right up. The pie arrived, steam rising from the perfectly golden crust, the vanilla ice cream already starting to melt down the sides. I took a bite and closed my eyes in appreciation. Alice had made apple pie like this, not too sweet with a hint of cinnamon and nutmeg. Good, huh? Donna asked, refilling my coffee. Perfect, I agreed. Reminds me of my late wife's recipe. Her expression softened. How long has she been gone? 12 years this October. She nodded sympathetically. My George has been gone 8 years, cancer. Same with Alice. A moment of understanding passed between us, the shorthand of shared grief. You got kids? She asked. A daughter, Rebecca. She's expecting my first grandchild, a boy. That's wonderful. Congratulations, I nodded, taking another bite of pie. Thanks. My son just had his third, Donna said proudly. A little girl this time after 2 boys. I watch them when he and his wife need a date night. It's the best thing being a grandparent. I'm looking forward to it, I said, and I meant it, despite the complications. Whatever issues I had with Jason and Rebecca, they didn't extend to this innocent child who would carry my bloodline forward. You'll be a natural, Donna said confidently. I can tell. I raised an eyebrow. How's that? She smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling. You've got kind eyes. Patient. That's what grandkids need most. Patience and kindness. I finished my pie in companionable silence, leaving Donna a generous tip when I paid the bill. Her casual confidence in my future grandfather abilities had touched something deep inside me, reinforcing my determination to be present in my grandson's life, regardless of the obstacles Jason might put in my way. Back at my apartment, I found another text from Rebecca waiting on my phone. Rebecca, Dad, do you still have Mom's old recipe box? Jason's mom wants to make those lemon bars Mom used to make for the shower. I stared at the message, a familiar mixture of emotions churning inside me. On one hand, it was touching that they wanted to include something of Alice's in the celebration. On the other hand, it felt like another intrusion, another thing they wanted to take and use while excluding me. I typed back, yes, I have it. The recipe needs to be followed exactly. Mom was very particular about the amount of lemon zest. I'd be happy to make them myself and have them ready for the shower. I waited for her response, wondering if she'd recognize the olive branch I was extending. 3 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Rebecca, thanks for offering, Dad, but Jason's mom really wants to make them herself. It's her thing, you know. Could I stop by tomorrow and get the recipe? So that was it. Oh. Not even Alice's special lemon bars, the ones Rebecca had always claimed were the best in the world, were something I could contribute to this celebration. I typed back, sure, I'll be home all day. I set the phone down and walked to the kitchen, where Alice's recipe box sat on a shelf next to my cookbooks. The small wooden box, hand-painted with delicate flowers, had been a gift from her mother. Inside were hundreds of index cards covered in Alice's neat handwriting, recipes collected over a lifetime, many handed down through generations of her family. I found the lemon bar recipe easily. It was well worn, the card slightly stained with butter and flour from frequent use. Alice had made these bars for every special occasion, birthdays, graduations, holidays. After her death, I'd tried to recreate them for Rebecca's college graduation party. They hadn't been quite right, a little too tart, the crust a bit too crumbly, but Rebecca had hugged me with tears in her eyes and said they were perfect. Now Jason's mother would make them, probably claiming the recipe as her own contribution to the celebration. Would they even mention Alice? Would my grandson ever know about his grandmother's famous lemon bars? I carefully copied the recipe onto a fresh index card. The original would stay with me, a small act of preservation that felt necessary in the moment. Then I went to bed, emotionally drained from the day's events but with a clearer sense of purpose than I'd had that morning. The next week passed in a blur of preparations. Rebecca came by to pick up the recipe, making small talk about the shower plans, but not staying long. I continued to receive texts with requests. Could they use my good serving platters? Was it okay if they rearranged the furniture on the terrace? Would I mind if they put up decorations the night before? To each request, I responded with calm acquiescence. Yes, use whatever you need. Yes, arrange things however you like. No, I don't mind at all. But privately, I was making my own arrangements. My appointment with Stanley had been productive. No drastic changes to my will, but some strategic amendments. The apartment would still go to Rebecca eventually, but with certain conditions attached. A trust would be established for my grandson's education, controlled by trustees I selected, rather than by his parents. Some of my savings would go to charities Alice and I had supported over the years. Are you sure about this, Frank? Stanley had asked as we finalized the documents. These changes could create tension with Rebecca. I'm sure, I'd said firmly. This isn't about punishing anyone, it's about making sure my wishes are respected, even after I'm gone. Stanley had nodded, understanding in his eyes. It's your right, and for what it's worth, I think these are reasonable adjustments. Now, as Saturday approached, I found myself oddly calm. I'd made peace with the situation, or at least with my response to it. I couldn't control how Rebecca and Jason treated me. But I could control how I responded to that treatment. On Friday evening, Rebecca and Jason came by to start setting up for the shower. I greeted them at the door, offering to help carry the decorations and supplies they'd brought. "Thanks, Dad, but we've got it," Rebecca said, kissing my cheek briefly. "You don't need to trouble yourself." "It's no trouble," I said. "It's my home. I want to help." Jason stepped forward, hand extended in his usual formal greeting. "Mr. Donovan, thanks again for letting us use your place. It's perfect for this." I shook his hand, noting the softness of his palm against my calloused one. "Happy to do it, Jason. And please, I've told you before, call me Frank." He nodded, but I knew he wouldn't. The formality was a barrier he maintained, keeping me firmly in the category of Rebecca's father rather than family. I watched as they bustled around my apartment, transforming it with blue and white decorations, rearranging furniture, setting up a gift table in what had been Rebecca's room. They spoke to each other in the shorthand of a long-established couple, hardly needing full sentences to communicate. "Honey, the banner, already on it. Did you bring in the blue bag?" I felt superfluous, an observer in what had once been my domain. After about 20 minutes of offering help that was politely declined, I retreated to the kitchen to make coffee. "Would either of you like some coffee? Or I could open a bottle of wine." Rebecca glanced up from arranging centerpieces on the dining room table. "No thanks, Dad. We can't stay long. We're meeting Jason's parents for dinner at 8. "I see." I poured myself a cup of coffee and leaned against the kitchen counter, watching them work. "Everything looks nice. Your mom would have loved all this." Rebecca's expression softened. "You think so?" I was trying to remember what her baby shower for me was like, but I obviously don't remember it. "She talked about it a lot," I said, memory washing over me. "Your grandma hosted it at their house. Your mom said it was small, just family and a few close friends. Your grandpa barbecued afterward, and all the men came to that part." Rebecca looked surprised. "The men came? I didn't know that." I nodded. "Different times, I guess." Jason checked his watch. "Becca, we should wrap this up if we're going to make dinner on time." Rebecca nodded, returning her attention to the decorations. "Just a few more things, then we're good." I sipped my coffee and kept quiet, recognizing the dismissal for what it was. They finished setting up about 30 minutes later. As they prepared to leave, Rebecca turned to me with a slightly anxious expression. "So, what time will you be heading out tomorrow? The shower starts at 2, but people might start arriving around 1:30. "I've made plans for the day," I said calmly. "I'll be out by noon." Relief washed over her face. "Perfect. Thank you so much, Dad. This means a lot to me." "I know it does, sweetheart." I hesitated, then decided to say what was on my mind. "I just wish I could be part of it. This is my first grandchild, too." Rebecca's expression grew uncomfortable. Dad, we've been through this. It's just not... It's traditionally a women's event, Mr. Donovan." Jason interjected smoothly. "My father won't be there either. But your mother will," I pointed out, "and from what I understand, several of her friends." Jason's posture stiffened slightly. "Well, yes, my mother is hosting, along with Rebecca's friend, Megan. In my home," I said, my voice still even, "using Alice's china and her recipes." Rebecca stepped between us, her expression pleading. "Dad, please don't make this difficult. We really appreciate you letting us use your apartment. It's so much nicer than our place, and the location is perfect for everyone." I took a deep breath. This wasn't how I wanted to leave things before they went to dinner. "You're right. I'm sorry. I want this to be a special day for you, Becca. That's all that matters." The tension visibly drained from her shoulders. "Thank you, Dad. I love you." "I love you too, sweetheart. Always will." They left shortly after, promising to text me when the shower was over, so I'd know when it was safe to return home. The choice of words, "safe to return," struck me as particularly telling, as if my presence would somehow contaminate the celebration. After they left, I walked through my apartment, taking in all the changes they'd made. Blue and white streamers hung from the ceiling, a "Welcome Baby Boy" banner stretched across the living room wall. The furniture had been rearranged to create a semicircle of seating, facing the large armchair, my chair, which had been designated as the place where Rebecca would open gifts. On the dining room table, place settings had been arranged with Alice's fine china. In the center stood a 3-tiered display that would presumably hold the shower refreshments, including Jason's mother's version of Alice's lemon bars. I ran my finger along the rim of one of the plates, remembering the last time they'd been used, Rebecca's wedding rehearsal dinner, which we'd hosted here 4 years ago. Jason's parents had made it clear they would have preferred to host at their country club, but Rebecca had insisted on having it here, to include Dad in the celebration. That had been before Jason's promotion, before they'd started spending holidays with his family instead of me, before the gradual distancing that had culminated in tomorrow's exclusion. I opened the china cabinet and looked at the empty spaces where the dishes usually sat. They'd used everything: dinner plates, salad plates, teacups, and saucers. Alice had loved this china. She'd carefully washed each piece by hand after every use, refusing to trust the dishwasher with her treasures. "What would you do, Ali?" I asked silently. "Would you let this happen, or would you put your foot down?" I knew the answer. Alice had been the backbone of our family, soft-spoken but steel-spined when it mattered. She wouldn't have allowed herself to be sidelined, particularly not in her own home. I closed the cabinet and walked to my bedroom, where I'd laid out my clothes for the next day. Not that it mattered what I wore to be absent from my own home, but habit died hard. My phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. "Miguel, we're meeting at Dave's tomorrow to watch the game. Fana couldn't you in?" I texted back, "I'll be there." At least I had somewhere to go, people who wanted my company. It was something. I slept poorly that night, my dreams a jumble of memories. Alice in the hospital, her face gaunt, but her eyes still bright. Rebecca as a child, riding on my shoulders at a 4th of July parade. The day we'd moved into this apartment, so full of hope and plans for the future. I woke early, made coffee, and sat on my terrace watching the city come to life. The morning air was crisp, with just a hint of autumn coolness. In a few hours, this space would be filled with women I didn't know, celebrating the impending birth of a child who would carry my blood but might never know me as I'd known my own grandfather. A constant, loving presence, a source of wisdom and unconditional love. At 11:30 I showered and dressed in jeans, a clean button-down shirt, and a light jacket. I packed a small bag with a few essentials: my medication, a book, my wallet, and keys. Just before noon, as promised, I prepared to leave my apartment. Standing at the door, I took one last look around, at the decorations festooning my home, at the carefully arranged furniture, at the dining table set with Alice's china. I'd been planning to simply walk out, to keep my word and make myself scarce as requested. But something shifted inside me as I stood there. This was my home, purchased with money I'd earned through decades of hard physical labor, filled with memories of the family I'd built and cherished, the place where I'd held Rebecca as she cried after her mother's funeral, the place where I'd taught her to make Alice's spaghetti sauce, to change a faucet washer, to manage a household budget, and they wanted me gone as if I were an embarrassment, an inconvenience, a relic from a past Rebecca was eager to leave behind. Before I could overthink it, I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Rebecca. "Me, I've reconsidered. I'll be attending the shower today. It's my home and my grandchild being celebrated. I belong there." I sent the message and waited, heart pounding. 3 minutes later, my phone rang. Rebecca calling instead of texting back, which I knew meant she was upset. "Dad," she said when I answered, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "We talked about this. The shower is for women." "Yes, I know," I interrupted, keeping my voice calm but firm. "Except for Jason's mother's friends from the country club, and except for using my home, Alice's china, and her recipes." "Dad!" "No, Rebecca, please listen. I've done everything you've asked. I cleared out your old room. I've stayed out of the way during your planning. I've said yes to every request. But this is where I draw the line. I will not be excluded from a celebration of my first grandchild that's happening in my own home." Silence stretched between us. Then finally, "Jason's not going to like this. I'm not asking for Jason's permission. Rebecca, I'm informing you of my decision. I'll be there at 1:30 and I'll be a gracious host. I won't interfere with any of your plans, but I will be present." Another long pause. Then, her voice smaller now, "Okay, Dad, if it means that much to you." "It does," I said firmly. "I'll see you soon." I hung up before she could respond and took a deep, steadying breath. My heart was racing, but underneath the anxiety was a profound sense of rightness. I'd stood up for myself calmly but firmly. It felt good. I texted Miguel to let him know I wouldn't make it to Dave's after all. Then I changed into nicer clothes, dark slacks, a blue button-down shirt that Alice had always said brought out my eyes, polished shoes. I even put on the tie Rebecca had given me for Christmas last year, a subtle navy silk with tiny anchors embroidered on it. At 1:15, I heard the first arrivals. Female voices in the hallway, the sound of the doorbell. Taking another deep breath, I went to answer it. Rebecca stood there with 3 women I didn't recognize, her expression a mixture of resignation and anxiety. Behind her stood an older woman, who could only be Jason's mother, the same carefully highlighted blonde hair and refined features as her son. "Dad," Rebecca said, her voice tight. "You remember Megan, my maid of honor? And this is Lisa and Jen from work. And this," she gestured to the older woman, "is Jason's mother, Victoria." I smiled warmly at each woman, shaking hands as introductions were made. "Welcome to my home. Please, come in." Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly at my emphasis on my home, but she extended her hand with practiced social grace. "Frank, so nice to finally meet you. Jason has told us so much about you." I doubted that very much, but I shook her hand and maintained my smile. "Likewise, Rebecca speaks highly of you." That was a lie, but a harmless one. Rebecca rarely mentioned her in-laws to me at all, which spoke volumes in itself. "What a lovely apartment," Victoria said, looking around with an appraising eye that I recognized from decades in construction, the look of someone mentally calculating property values. "You've been here how long?" 30 years, I said. "Bought it when the neighborhood was still considered a bit rough. Best investment I ever made." Victoria nodded, a flicker of what might have been respect crossing her features. "Real estate is always a wise choice. Our summer home in the Hamptons has tripled in value since we purchased it in the 90s. I nodded politely, as if comparing my Brooklyn apartment to a Hamptons vacation home was completely reasonable. More guests began arriving, and I fell easily into the role of co-host, taking coats, offering drinks, making small talk. I'd spent decades managing construction sites, dealing with architects, clients, and workers from all walks of life. Social niceties weren't beyond me, despite what Jason and his mother might think. Rebecca watched me with a mixture of surprise and what might have been a grudging admiration. Had she forgotten that I was capable of this? That before I was her embarrassing blue-collar father, I'd been a respected project manager who'd overseen multi-million-dollar developments? The shower proceeded largely as planned. Games were played, something involving guessing the size of Rebecca's belly with string, and another where guests had to identify melted chocolate bars in diapers, which struck me as rather disgusting. Gifts were opened, with Rebecca seated in my armchair, exactly as they'd arranged. I stayed on the periphery, making sure glasses were filled and plates were cleared, playing the gracious host without inserting myself into the center of the celebration. Several of Rebecca's friends made a point of speaking with me, asking about my retirement, complimenting my home. One even drew me into a conversation about the changing neighborhood, seeming genuinely interested in my perspective as a long-term resident. The only tension came when it was time for refreshments. Victoria had indeed made Alice's lemon bars, and as she placed them on the tiered display, she announced to the room, "An old family recipe of mine. Everyone always begs for these at our country club events." I felt a flash of anger, quickly suppressed. Rebecca caught my eye across the room, her expression apologetic but also pleading, "Don't make a scene." I didn't. Instead, when the bars were served and someone complimented them, I smiled and said, "They are delicious, aren't they? My late wife, Alice, was known for these. She won the blue ribbon at the county fair 3 years running with that recipe." I'm touched that Victoria wanted to recreate them for today's celebration, a lovely tribute to Rebecca's mother. Victoria's smile froze, and several women turned to her with questioning looks. She recovered quickly, though. "Yes, Frank shared the recipe with me. Alice must have been quite the baker." "She was," I agreed pleasantly. "Rebecca has her creative spirit, and her eyes." The moment passed, but I noticed Rebecca watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read, part embarrassment, part something else. Pride, perhaps? As the shower wound down and guests began to leave, I continued in my role as host, thanking each person for coming, helping retrieve coats, walking some of the older ladies to the elevator. Finally, only Rebecca, Victoria, and Megan remained, cleaning up the decorations and packaging leftover food. "Leave the dishes," I said, as Victoria began gathering the china. "I'll take care of those." "Oh, I couldn't possibly," she began. "I insist," I said firmly. "They were Alice's wedding china. They need special handling." Victoria relinquished the stack of plates with obvious reluctance. I took them carefully, noting with approval that they appeared undamaged. Rebecca approached me as I was wrapping the plates in dish towels before placing them in the dishwasher. "Dad," she said quietly, "can we talk for a minute?" I nodded, following her onto the terrace, which was now free of decorations, but still held the lingering scent of the floral centerpieces. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice low, "about all of this. About trying to exclude you." I waited, not making it easier for her. "It was Jason's idea," she continued. He said it would be awkward to have you here, that his mum would feel uncomfortable." "And you agreed with him," I said, not a question but a statement. She looked down. "I didn't want to rock the boat. Things have been tense with his family lately. This pregnancy wasn't exactly planned, and his parents were upset about the timing, with Jason just getting the promotion and us still in the small apartment." I felt a surge of protective anger. They were upset about their grandchild. Because of timing? Rebecca nodded miserably. They had a whole life plan mapped out for Jason. Career milestones, property purchases, then children. We've deviated from the script. And somehow excluding me from this shower would help smooth things over with them. "It was stupid," she admitted, "and wrong. I knew it was wrong, but I was trying so hard to make everything perfect, to win their approval, at my expense." She met my eyes then, her own filling with tears. "Yes, at your expense. And I'm sorry, Dad. Truly sorry." I softened, reaching out to touch her cheek. "You don't need to win anyone's approval, Becca, least of all people who would be upset about the miracle of a new life, because it doesn't fit their timeline." She leaned into my touch, reminding me painfully of her childhood, when a gentle hand on her cheek could solve any problem. "I know. And watching you today, you were amazing, Dad. So gracious and poised. Victoria was actually impressed. She said so." I chuckled. High praise indeed. Rebecca's expression grew serious. "I've been taking you for granted, letting Jason's family's values become my values, forgetting everything you taught me about what really matters, which is family, loyalty, being there for the people who've always been there for you." She placed her hand on her swollen belly. "I want my son to know you, Dad, really know you, to learn from you the way I did." I felt a lump form in my throat. "I want that too, Becca. More than anything." She stepped forward and hugged me, her belly pressing against me, and I felt a flutter, my grandson, kicking or stretching inside her. "He knows his grandpa's voice," Rebecca said, smiling through tears. "He's saying hello." I placed my hand gently on her stomach, feeling another small movement. "Hello, little man," I said softly. "I can't wait to meet you." Over Rebecca's shoulder, I saw Victoria watching us from the doorway, her expression unreadable. Our eyes met briefly before she turned away, busying herself with gathering her purse and the container of remaining lemon bars. "I should finish helping clean up," Rebecca said, pulling back reluctantly. "It can wait," I told her. "Sit down for a few minutes. You must be exhausted." She nodded gratefully, lowering herself into one of the terrace chairs. "This last trimester is kicking my butt. My feet are so swollen by the end of the day." "Your mother was the same way," I said, sitting across from her. "I used to rub her feet every night during those last few weeks." Rebecca smiled wistfully. "I wish she was here for this." "Me too, sweetheart. But she'd be so proud of you." I paused, then added, "And she'd tell you to trust your instincts, not someone else's idea of what's proper or appropriate." Rebecca nodded, understanding the gentle rebuke. I needed that reminder. We sat in companionable silence for a few moments, watching the late afternoon sun cast golden light across the neighboring buildings. "Dad," Rebecca said finally, "would you be open to having dinner with us next weekend? Just the three of us. I think Jason and you should spend some real time together before the baby comes." I considered this. "I'd like that. But only if Jason wants it too, really wants it, not just going along to make you happy." "He will," Rebecca said with surprising firmness. "He's going to have to adjust his thinking about a lot of things, starting with how he treats my father." I raised an eyebrow, surprised by her assertiveness. "Pregnancy hormones making you feisty?" She laughed. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just remembering who I am. Who raised me?" She reached across and squeezed my hand. "A man who would never let someone else tell him he wasn't welcome in his own home. Who stood up for himself today, with more grace than I could have imagined." "I had a good teacher too," I said. "Your mother never let anyone walk all over her. Or over me." "I remember," Rebecca said softly. "I want to be that kind of mother. The kind who teaches her son to respect himself and others, to recognize real value when he sees it, not just status or appearances. Victoria emerged onto the terrace. "Rebecca, dear, I think we're all finished inside. Megan has called a car. We should be going." Rebecca struggled to stand, and I automatically reached out to help her up. She squeezed my hand again before releasing it. "Thank you for everything, Dad. For letting us use your home, for being so gracious today. For being you. Always," I said simply. After they left, I wandered through my apartment, restoring order, putting furniture back in its original positions, carefully washing and drying Alice's china before returning it to the cabinet. The place still smelled of perfume and the lemon bars, but it felt like mine again. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Rebecca, just wanted to say again how much I appreciate you today. You showed me what real class looks like. I love you, Dad, and so does your grandson already. Dinner next Friday at 7, I texted back. Wouldn't miss it. Love you too, Becca. Always have, always will." I set the phone down and walked to my liquor cabinet, pouring a small measure of the good scotch I saved for special occasions. Raising the glass in a silent toast, I spoke to Alice in my thoughts. "We did good, Ali. She lost her way for a bit there, but she found it again, and that grandson of ours, I have a feeling he's going to bring us all together in ways we can't even imagine yet." The apartment felt different somehow, not just returned to its original state, but renewed, like the home it had always been and would continue to be for me, for Rebecca, and for the new generation that would soon join our family. I took my scotch out to the terrace and watched as twilight descended on Brooklyn, the lights of the city blinking on one by one. Tomorrow I'd call Stanley and tell him to revert my will to its original form. There was no need for those protective measures anymore. Rebecca had remembered who she was and who I was to her, and that was worth more than any apartment, any inheritance, any amount of money could ever be. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.